Welcome to Circle Sanctuary Network Podcasts, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us through the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms, through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community.
Good evening, good morning, good night, good second breakfast, whenever you are, wherever you are. My name is Laura Gonzalez, and I'd like to welcome you to Lunatic Mondays, Lunes, Lunáticos, the very first bilingual show for CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Network podcast. And tonight we have a guest whom I adore, and also he's looking so good today. My dear friend, Storm Faerywolf. He's a professional author, teacher, warlock, priest, an initiate of the fairy tradition of witchcraft. He holds the black wand of a master and is the founder of the Blue Rose lineage of fairy. He is one of the founding teachers of the Black Rose School of Witchcraft, and he travels internationally teaching the magical arts. He's also the author of Betwixt and Between and so many other titles. And if you want to learn more about him, you can find him on www.faerywolf.com. And today we're here to celebrate. Yes, we're still celebrating Pride. I don't care. We're still celebrating my birthday. I don't care. And we're going to be talking about the Satyr's Kiss. But before we go into the nitty gritty of the book and everything, how is Pride Month? No, first, how are you? And then how is Pride Month?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you again for having me back. It's always a pleasure. And Pride Month, I mean, obviously I love Pride Month. I kind of live for Pride Month, but I also want it to be every month, you know, so that's kind of my message is we shouldn't just have a day or a month. Queer people are here every single day. And so we need to make every day Pride Day. We should be proud of ourselves every single day.
And you just remind me, and I have to quote him every time I say this because I love when he said it. My dear friend and colleague, Christine Ortiz, who is also a gay man, who wrote a wonderful piece in Spanish, though, speaking about how pride should come from within and how very much in tune to what you have done with this wonderful book of bringing and harnessing that pride, love, and dignity from within. I mean, I love so many things about this book, but I don't want to like give it away. So first I want to ask you, obviously, this is kind of on the nose, but what inspired you to write this book?
Well, it was the very first book that I ever wanted to write. And of course, the inspiration was that there wasn't anything like it, you know, out there in the world, especially when I first wanted to write it. I was 14 when I first wanted to write this book or some version, you know, thereof. And I've said this before, it would have been a terrible book had I written it then. I had zero experience with the subject matter. But I just intuitively knew that sexuality was such a part, such a foundational power in witchcraft. And the books at the time were really kind of downplaying that. Oh, sex is just symbolic, it's just fertility, you know, those types of things. And all of that can be true. But I think it was more of a PR campaign. You know, it was trying to really say, oh, we're not threatening, you know, we're not having orgies or whatever, and we're not hexing people and, you know, all of that stuff. And but I just knew there's something there. And then as I grew up and I experienced more of the pagan community, I really did see that there was such a heterosexual bias going into the foundations of the magical philosophies. I mean, we even before, you know, Wicca, you know, you look at the Hermetic principles and you get that principle of gender, which, you know, really just needs to be either scrapped or turned on its head. We need to look at it and realize gender is not sex, you know, and so we need to rethink this. So there was a lot of that gender polarity BS, you know, that was used as an excuse to marginalize queer people in the craft. You know, there were plenty of instances in which, you know, I was told that if we're circling up together, you have to go boy, girl, you know, kind of like kindergarten or, you know, whatever, because that's the magical current. And like, well, gay men or gay women are working magically together, can't they stand next to each other in the circle? No, because it's blah, blah, blah. And then it became, oh, well, we all have the male and female energies within ourselves. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to balance that. And, you know, to that I say, well, that's still enshrining a heterosexual model, you know, as the one that everything else needs to be, you know, judged against. You know, I don't actually believe in male energy and female energy. I believe in energy. I believe in consciousness. And those things take on a different flavor when they are expressed through us. But a lot of stuff that we consider to be masculine or feminine is really just a cultural projection. You know, you can go into another culture and then that turns on its head, you know? And so it's more about what we're accustomed to societally, and then we just perpetuate that. We're creatures of habit. And we have a habit of accepting the hetero paradigm as quote unquote normal. You know, but I love, there's a quote, I'm probably gonna get it all messed up. I always mess up quotes, but there's a great quote from Dorothy Parker, you know, that says, heterosexuality is not normal, it's just common. And, you know, I love that because it's not getting down on heterosexuality. I mean, you know, that it's a beautiful, viable expression of love and power, but that's not for everyone. You know, that's not for me. That's not for, you know, queer women. That's not for asexual people or aromantic people. You know, so I think that now we're at a time that we recognize there's a lot of different types of people, and the universe is way bigger and more diverse than we've ever given it credit for. And I think our job now as like witches, warlocks, sorcerers, people of wonder, you know, now in the 21st century, our job is to redefine a lot of this stuff, not abandon, you know, our ancestral roots, but to honor those roots and also recognize that we don't live in that world anymore. And people have more choices societally now than they used to. You know, it's not that there's more queer people now or more trans people now. There's just more queer and trans people that accept themselves now and are feeling more comfortable coming out. So when I hear from the conservatives, oh my God, now everyone's turning queer. No, not everyone is turning queer. You know, it's just that there is a higher percentage of people that feel more comfortable coming out because we've created a slightly better environment for them to do so. We need to keep going.
Exactly.
You know? And that's what part of this book is about, is to like inspire specifically queer men, but hopefully everyone can get something out of it, to inspire us to do our own magic, to not fall prey to these rules that really don't apply to us, you know, in the same way.
This reminds me so much of, like, in the goddess tradition, how we, you know, I'm talking kind of like from the other perspective, or from perspective that is a little bit different. Whereas we explain that these are concepts that in our limited understanding, we have boxed feminine as a nurturer, caregiver, loving, compassionate, and we have boxed masculine qualities, bigger quotes, as, you know, strong and direct. And these are just concepts that we have divided, and we have put a name on them, and then we attach them to visible genitals, some people.
Right.
And the goddess, as the divine or spirit or whatever people call it, is everything. And you see a cisgender woman being mad and upset, and there's like, oh, she's very masculine. No, she's just mad.
Right, exactly.
You know,
she is a human being who is experiencing anger. That's not masculine or feminine. You know, that is simply an emotion.
Yeah.
You know, we all have that capacity, you know, so it's crazy to me.
And as a queer woman who grew up understanding or not understanding my queerness, and also my habits and you know, behaviors, I was often labeled, you know, in Mexico we have this derogatory term, it's disgusting, they say machorra, which is like a macho woman. And I'm like, why do I have to be labeled as such when I'm just experiencing my emotions, as you say.
Right. Well, the majority often, in order to feel comfortable, they have to project their fear, and they have to project, their judgment,
Yeah.
onto the minority. And that's a human trait, but it's a trait that I hope that we can address, and we can move beyond, because we have that capability. We can evolve.
Yes, certainly.
Life is better now, for queer people than it was, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, although it's still, as it's still an uphill battle.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many times people have said to me, oh, well, now that, queer people can get married, now you have equal rights. No, how adorable you think so, but obviously a lot of heterosexual people wouldn't really be aware of all the other rights that we still don't have. I forget how many states you can still be fired or denied jobs or denied housing just because you're perceived as being queer.
Yep.
And there's no law against it. There's no federal protection, for gay people, on that level. We have a lot of work to do. And also, I will say, racism. I want to, make sure that that's always part of the conversation, because a lot of times people talk about queer rights, gay rights, and all that stuff, and really the focus is on white cisgendered men. And I say that as a white cisgendered man, right? And I recognize that. I'm fighting for my rights, but that doesn't mean anything if I'm not also fighting for the rights of my brothers and sisters and sacred others as well. All stripes, all races, all colors, because we're all fucking human beings, and we all deserve to be treated with dignity and equality. And I can't believe it's 2022. I almost said 2021. My brain is all like mush from pandemic life. I can't believe that we're still having these arguments. And in fact, there's a bit of regression, as we know, especially here in the United States.
Yeah.
We have the dark cloud, the specter of rights being taken away. When they made that announcement about Roe v. Wade, that has such, just on its own, it's terrible for everyone. But then also the implication is, oh, all these other people now might get their rights taken away as well.
Yeah.
So if people aren't outraged about abortion, being taken away from people, which you should, everyone should be outraged about that. But if that's not enough to get you mad about it, they're so coming for queer rights next.
Yeah.
That's exactly how that happens, how that works.
Yeah.
And so we have to fight, and so a part of this also, this book is about just putting that message out there. Hey, we're going to have pride in ourselves. We're going to do our own magic that is focused on our own community, so that we can actually have that sense of pride from within, because that's what it's going to take for us to fight the good fight.
Yeah. And especially I appreciate as a person of color, as an Indigenous woman, I appreciate you pointing out kind of like an obvious fact that you, as a white cis gay man, are advocating, because it is the people that hold the systems in place, either directly or indirectly. It falls, the brunt of the responsibility falls on you.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
ones that benefit the most. And that's why anything and everything that is deemed as quote unquote feminine, it's been ostracized and discriminated against, because if you're not white cis male, then you're less than in their world. And there is also something that a lot of people are not ready to get into the conversation, but those who hold the systems of oppression are also being hurt by those systems.
Absolutely. Patriarchy hurts everyone involved. It's not just hurting women, although it most certainly is. But it hurts men too. Cis heterosexual men are also hurt by the system, because I know a lot of straight white men who are cool and who have emotions and will cry, and that's taboo in the culture. Masculinity is a temporary condition that can be revoked at any time. Oh, you have to man up. Oh, you're not man enough. Oh, you're not a real man. Those are the things that I grew up with. I grew up after people were asking me what my gender was every single day up through 3rd grade. After that, I was constantly told that I wasn't a real man. Oh, you're a gay man. A gay man isn't a real man. No, fuck that. I'm a gay man and I'm a real man. And that's also part of the reason that I adopted the term warlock, was to kind of be in people's faces about it. No, I'm a real man. I'm just a different type of man than what you've been accustomed to in your boring cis heterosexual world, whatever. I can do anything I want to do, and that doesn't necessarily make me feminine. And so I don't know. I think we all need to accept that these designations that we have given things, oh, this is male, male energy, female energy. That's not true. There's just energy. There's just consciousness. How does that express through this individual in this situation at this time? You might culturally then think, oh, that feels more feminine or that feels more masculine, but that is a cultural marker. That is not an absolute. That has nothing based in nature, so we need to get over that, but yeah, so using a term like warlock is in part to kind of shake people up and make them think what's going on. I also feel, and this is something I wrote in the Satyr's Kiss, I also feel that the term warlock, as it was applied 500 years ago, to men in the craft, it probably was a type of misogyny that was labeled on these men, because they were all called witches, and you knew that was bad enough. But these men and only men were called warlocks. And the word did originally mean oathbreaker, deceiver, in league with the devil. But why would they call men something different than the women? And they also thought witchcraft was a particularly feminine practice. Here's another example too, and I didn't put this in the book, but this idea of like cultural projections of male and female energy. Today we often think, oh, men are the ones who are like lusty, women are supposed to be more chaste, whatever. I know that's ridiculous, right? I mean, that's ridiculous, but that's the overculture generally, is like, oh, men are out there and they're the ones who are lusting for sex, and women have to stay away from the men, and blah blah blah. But 500 years ago, and more recently, during like the witch trials, it was the belief that women were the ones who were lusting everywhere, and that made them particularly susceptible to the wiles of the devil. So that's just a cultural flip. So which is it, people? Well, it's both. It's just people. It doesn't matter male or female, and there's nothing wrong with it. But so back then, I think that to call a man a warlock, it was the extra insult of like, oh, you're doing this womanly thing. It kind of reminded me of the story of Odin, learning like the woman's magic, from Freya, whatever. And they kind of ribbed him over it, a little bit, but still he had this, it was usually practiced by women, but now he had this, this particular type of magic as well. So I kind of take inspiration. I don't know if it's absolutely true, but it feels true. And in terms of a relationship to the word, it's just as true as women using the word witch, because I mean, come on, the word witch, it was commonly used to mean an ugly old woman or a displeasing woman. I challenge people to use that definition now and not get slapped, so me reclaiming warlock, it should be seen as no different, than women claiming witch. But it's funny the flack that I get, over. I recognize it's an uphill battle in the pagan movement, but it's only a problem in the pagan movement because apparently our people have never cracked a dictionary before. But whatever. That's fine.
Yet we pride ourselves on being so informed.
I
every time I hear you talk about this, it reminds me of why I actually use the word bruja on my business.
Gotta represent.
On my, I need one of those, man. Hook me up. For those who are only listening, Storm is showing me their water cup with the Llewellyn symbol on it, and now I want one.
I stole it from Devin, and because I think they gave him one and they gave Matt one, and I was like, I want one, and they didn't send me one, so I just stole Devin's. But yeah, I should ask them. Send me one of these. It's actually the best water bottle I've ever had. I drink so much water now. Thank you, Llewellyn. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
Anyway, no, I was saying that when I told somebody that bruja and witch is just the same word in Spanish, and this person almost lost their mind, and they keep telling me like, don't call me bruja. I'm not a bruja. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's gonna be my nickname. Like, I'm really gonna. So my website is Bruja Laura Gonzalez, and my business cards it says Bruja Laura Gonzalez. You know, because like, who are you gonna tell me not to define myself as I want? Which, by the way, stay tuned, folks, because Storm is gonna come back sometime in the future, and we're gonna be talking about the witch's name, which is his other new book, because he has two baby books that they're almost twins.
Right.
But today
today
we're concentrating on the Satyr. I messed it up again.
You did, yeah, Satyr's
kiss.
You got it right.
But in the future, very near future, he's gonna come back and we're gonna be talking about the witch's name. But back to this book, which is, by the way, so good looking.
Thank you.
For those people who are just listening, within half an hour, the video will be out. So come back and watch the video so you can see the cover of is this you?
No, I don't know who that is. It's probably like a stock image.
It's a very good looking man on the
They did a
cover.
good job. Yeah, and I'm glad that they chose an image of the man from the back. And here's an aside too. So one of my initiates in fairy tradition is David Salisbury, and he's also an author, and he wrote a book called Teen Spirit Wicca, many years ago. And then somebody pointed out that if you put those books side by side, it looks like it's the same person on the cover. Because in Teen Spirit Wicca, you have like a younger guy in the same pose with his arms out, kind of in praise. You've seen him from the back. So the headcanon for us now is that it's the same person in Teen Spirit Wicca, but now he's all grown up.
Oh my God, that is so cute.
I love it.
Speaking of this wonderful book, a foreword from the Christopher Pensack, but I have to put on my glasses because I want to read this quote from, well, let me read the quote first. Finally, a grimoire that empowers, challenges, and inspires queer men to stand in the magical potentiality of our queerness. Storm guides the reader on a roller coaster ride through queer magic and sexual expression and connection in a refreshing and uplifting manner. None other than Christopher Hughes, the chief of the Anglesey Druid Order, author from The Calderborn, the Book of Celtic Magic, Carried When, etc., my dear friend as well. And
he's lovely.
He is one of the most lovely people I ever met. But I love that all the good names with all the people that is praising this book. I love that you jump. Probably on the first page it says, nobody can force you to have any kind of sexual initiation, interaction, etc. I cannot believe, as you said earlier, that it's 2022 and we still have to remind people that sexual forced initiations of any kind are bullshit.
It's also rape. I classify that as cultic rape. When a teacher insists, that, in order to be initiated, you have to have sex with me. I know I'm making some enemies here, I know, but that is rape. That is not okay. Are there ways to share witchcraft in a sexual way? Absolutely. When everyone's on the same level, if we're all like initiates, we're all, of the same, or just, we already have a sexual relationship perhaps, and now we want to bring in magic into that. That's a great way to do that too. But if you are a teacher and you have students there is a power imbalance there. And that power dynamic is in favor of the teacher. And even if your students are all adults, they should all be adults. Even if you're an adult and you think you can give consent, you cannot give full informed consent because there is a power imbalance. And this is why therapists aren't allowed by law to have sex with their clients, doctors with their patients, teachers at, in schools, often that is prohibited because transference is a real thing. A student can admire their teacher, their doctor, and then feel those feelings. And that's not okay. That's not okay for the person in power to act upon them. But I know several people in the craft from different traditions who staunchly claim it is their right as teachers to have sex with their students, that somehow having sex with their students, they think is this beautiful bonding, experience. They can transmit, these magical mysteries. I also want to say, all of that is true. You can pass magical mysteries through sexual intercourse. And again, if you are already lovers with somebody, that's a beautiful way to do it. But if that's the only way that you know how to do that, then you're not a very good witch. You need to figure some shit out. I'm sorry. But I think it's cultic rape. But there's a lot of people that are just very wrapped up into that like, no, this is my right. And that's made me some enemies in the fairy tradition and beyond.
Yeah.
So, but that's fine. Those people are not, invited to my parties. So
yeah.
And
it goes back to the culture of patriarchy and abuse and how ingrained it is in our society that, a person of power can claim, like, I can do whatever I want. Like, no, hell no, that is spiritual abuse and
absolutely
sexual abuse, spiritual abuse. And just to piggyback on what you said, if you who are listening or watching ever encounter a teacher that tells you, oh, and by the way, for your initiation, run.
Right.
Run,
Yeah.
run for your life.
Yeah.
The only
Especially if they insist on it. But I would say even if it's just offered, I would really look at that askew. I don't offer that. The first thing that I say to my students is, I will not be having sex with you, because you'd be surprised how many people expect that that's the way it is, especially in fairy tradition. I've heard that a lot. People saying, oh, well,
Really?
the initiation is sexual, right? It has to be sexual. No, it doesn't have to be. Yes, there is a tradition of doing it that way, but there's also a tradition of not doing it that way, so you have choices. But one of the founders, Cora Anderson, she wrote in her book 50 Years in the Fairy Tradition, she talked about this thing that we call right by intention of the heart. And it was specifically a way to pass initiation in a non-sexual way so that the initiate to be would not have to break any vows. Perhaps they're in a monogamous relationship, they're married or whatnot. Why should you have to break your vows to your partner in order to become initiated in the craft? You shouldn't. You should not have to compromise your ideals. If you're being asked to compromise your ideals in order to join a magical group, that magical group isn't worth anything.
Exactly.
Any magical group that's worth its weight in salt is going to make you more of who you already are. They're going to validate you through compassion, and they're going to challenge you, to grow and get better. But they're not going to make demands of you to go against your nature.
Yeah.
To that will take away your power base. That is just power over. Those are tools of the patriarchy. They need to be wholly rejected. And so I definitely made sure that in the Satyr's Kiss, I really made that clear, because it is a book with a healthy dose of sex magic. It really is about, hey, if you want to bring sex into your witchcraft practice, here's a great way to do that. There's exercises for individuals, for couples, for groups. But then at the same time, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. And I also give what I call blue rights, versions of the spells and rituals that don't involve, sexual intercourse or sexual activity, because not everyone is going to want to do that all the time. Even if you do want to incorporate sex into your witchcraft, you don't want to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Right. It just, sex should be special. It's not,
And in my opinion, consenting adults and caring for your body as well. And as a survivor of a cult, yes, my name is Laura Gonzalez. I survived a cult. I was a 6.5 year involved in a group of indigenous knowledge. They're wise, and I gotta tell you something. If your spirit keeps telling you to go, listen to your spirit.
Yeah.
Listen to your spirit,
Yeah.
because I was in a cult, but I was, and I say this with a grain of salt, only emotionally abused. There were other people who were physically abused, as in punishments, physical punishments. So, your spirit knows. So listen to your spirit and go, go,
Yeah.
go. But speaking of the rituals, you were talking about blue rights and red rights. And the time is flying. I don't know if you look at the clock yet,
Oh
but
my goodness.
I
Yeah.
have, yeah, time is going. So I really want to get into the book. Our conversation is lovely, but we're here to talk about the book.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
There's a list of exercises, a list of rituals, and a list of spells. There's a wonderful foreword by Christopher Pensek. I said that already.
Yes.
And out of a lot of things that you talk about here in the book, I am in love with the coming out of the closet spell.
Oh,
That is
thank
so
you.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Why is it important? We all know, right? As queer and or LGBTQ or whatever alphabet mafia letter you are. You and I here know not everybody has to come out of the closet, and not everybody needs to be respected whether they're in or out. However, you wrote a wonderful thing for those who are ready. Can you talk about it?
Well, I just think that, it's one of those things that is a common queer experience, coming out. We often think of coming out as a singular event, but really coming out is kind of ongoing. You meet new people, and you have a choice. Am I going to be withholding, or am I going to be open, right? And that's your choice. I like how you said that, basically respect isn't determined on your status, in terms of like, are you in or are you out? That's a personal decision for everybody. The only exception I make for that are for politicians. If politicians, especially anti-queer politicians, if we find out that they're actually queer on the side, oh, you forced those people out of the closet, you expose them because they're hurting the rest of us. That's the exception. Everybody else should be able to live as they decide for themselves. Not everybody is going to want to come out of the closet, maybe because their friends or family won't understand. I don't know, maybe if you're living in the Midwest, in the Bible Belt, and no one is going to understand, it's going to make your life harder, maybe dangerous. It might be dangerous for you to come out. No one should fault you for doing what you feel you need to do in order to be comfortable and to live your life safely. But there are those of us who do feel comfortable coming out and being public. And I think it's important for us to do that if we do feel comfortable doing so, because the more of us that are living out there openly, it makes it a little bit easier for other people to do the same. And it makes it a little bit harder for other people to spread that hate, just a little bit, so it is a political act too. Me living totally open is a political act. The ritual was really because I feel like, coming out is just something that happens and that it isn't often commemorated. There's no Hallmark card for that. Maybe there is now, I don't know, but there certainly wasn't when I came out at 17. And I just think it's something that should be celebrated. And if we're talking about what I call a queer craft, which is a very personal craft, and I think that we should be given the opportunity to spiritualize, to ritualize, these events. So for somebody like me, like I said, I came out, officially when I was 17. I didn't at that time do a ritual, for it. I spent a lot of years kind of doing my spiritual work around it. But if I was a new baby queer, coming out now and in the craft, it might be nice to have a ritual that spoke about that. And even if you don't perform the ritual, You know, the main part of the symbolism was about leaving an old life behind that doesn't serve you, you know, like wearing those old clothes and then getting rid of the old clothes, and you're kind of coming out like a butterfly, you know, coming out of that chrysalis. And I just felt that the imagery was so powerful, because that's really what I felt. You know, I was in a cocoon, I was in a chrysalis, but then when I chose to be truthful about who I was and to have that fire of pride, you know, beaming out of me, that's when I kind of became that butterfly. And I suddenly had so much more confidence than I had ever had before. And so I just thought, well, having some sort of ritual, even if people don't actually perform it, I think reading it and knowing it's there, you know, I think there's some value in that as well. So hopefully I'll hear from people who maybe do perform it. I would love to hear people's feedback, you know, on it. But I thank you for pointing that out, because that was something in my test group. My test group was a lot of queer men from a lot of different age ranges, but especially the older ones were like, well, who is this for? They didn't necessarily feel that there was any value in that particular exercise. I'm like, well, it might not be for you. It's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be for every queer person. But for the person that it's going to mean something for, it's nice to have that there. And again, even if you just read it and it's in the back of your mind, oh, coming out of the closet is me coming out of my chrysalis. I get to be that beautiful butterfly, and I can take flight and just like say bye, Felicia, to all those, you know, haters,
Yeah.
and flutter off and do my own fabulous thing. So thank you for pointing that out. I really appreciate it.
And you know what's funny? I don't know if you're aware of this or not. I don't know how many Mexican or Mexican American people are in your life, but in Mexico, a way of, in a comedic but almost derogatory way, to point out queer and or gay people is they call them butterflies. You know,
Yeah,
mariposas or
mariposa.
mariposones. Yeah. And I'm like, what a beautiful way to reclaim
Right.
that butterfly.
And I think so many times that's what the queer community does, right? When I was a little, well, I didn't even know I was queer, but when I was a little queer boy, you know, I'm in the 70s, I was often called fairy. And, you know, and that was used as a derogatory. And now that's part of my name. You know,
Same.
that's the tradition that I initiated into and now teach. And I find that a complete source of power. Queer was used as a slur against us, and a lot of us have claimed that back. You can't hurt me with it when I wear it proudly.
Yep.
You know, so I think that's part of our culture, and I think any minority culture, you know, will do that as well. I mean, Black people with the N-word, you know, have really taken that, and they will use it as a point of power amongst themselves. That's beautiful, and that's awesome, and that's what you do, you know. But if someone's coming at me calling me queer, and they're meaning it with all that, you know, hatred and whatever, it doesn't have the same punch that it used to, because it's like, girl, you calling me queer, I'm just going to call you psychic. What the fuck, you know? So.
I love that. There's so many intersections that are, and I love how we are organically tapping into all of these power places, because like on the body positivity or fat phobia communities, we're also doing that with the word fat, because the word fat is just an adjective, just like any other
right,
describing words, right? So somebody's tall, somebody's thin, somebody has a beard, somebody's bald, somebody's hairy, and then some people are thin and some people are fat. And there has to be that understanding of reclaiming, like, and when people call me, and this, I know about one of my apprentices, she's gonna fall off the chair laughing when I say this, because when people come to me and go like, you're fat, I'll be like, where? Like, really? Like, where? I haven't noticed. Like, come on, you know. So let us reclaim that power by taking the power of the words that being used to offend or diminish, and taking pride on our identity. There are two more things that I really want to tap into. I don't want to talk too much about the actual ritual, but I love the setting your intentions ritual. I think it's fantastic, and I love that you mentioned that it can be done as a blue or as a red. And for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, buy the book, get the book, so you know what I'm talking about. But within that ritual and within a lot of the pages, you talk about two things that are very important, being a 70s baby myself as well. A lot of us, our elders got robbed by AIDS.
Yes.
We miss our elders. And on that ritual of setting the intention and elsewhere in the book, you talk about joy. Joy and elders, something that is conveniently put aside. We just lived it through the whole month of June. Everybody's queer because it sells.
Right.
And then after that, we don't talk about our elders. We don't talk about our joy. We don't talk about our day-to-day lives. And we don't talk about our pleasure, especially, you know, gay men. I think in particular, as well as women, you don't talk about pleasure, you know, because it's impure. I love how you speak about joy and being an elder of the future.
Thank you. I think that it's really important that well, first I want to say, spot on. I'm so glad that you brought that up in terms of that we lost our elders. You know, when I was growing up and I had just come out, again, I came out when I was 17, there were precious few older gay men that I knew. In fact, in the book, I talk about one in particular, Colin Smith Tranquilson. And I think he was 11 years older than me. And that was a big deal because nobody else, it was like everybody was in my age group. You know, nobody knew any older gay men because they had all died, you know. And I didn't live in San Francisco. I lived in, you know, in the suburbs. I still live in the suburbs of San Francisco. And so maybe I would have known a few more had I lived actually in the city. But basically an entire generation was just wiped out before the US government even mentioned the word AIDS. You know, an entire generation of mostly queer men were just wiped from the face of the earth. And so we didn't have those same experiences that other cultures have of the stories being handed down, you know, and so we were kind of just lost, a little rudderless. And I think that it's important that we recognize, especially I recognize as I'm getting older, I'm 51 now. And I'm realizing, well, that's the role that I'm stepping into now. I'm to be the elder, you know, now. In fact, some people would consider me now, you know, an elder. It's not a term that I use for myself. It seems a little self-aggrandizing, you know, but I recognize that I have a responsibility, you know, to pass on my experience, what I've learned, you know, over the years, and that all of us do, you know, and that's the responsibility that we have to our queer communities. Our responsibility is to be authentic and to share our knowledge, because the straight people aren't going to do it for us. You know, we have to take that responsibility ourselves. And but I do think that we can't just focus on what's bad and the pain. We have to focus on the joy. We have to focus on what is pleasurable, because we want to create a world that is full of joy and healing. And we're not going to heal by only focusing on the bad. I'm not saying be a Pollyanna. I'm not saying turn a blind eye to the pain. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering. We have to work to heal that. You can only heal that by addressing it and talking about it, but we can't get stuck there. And it's like with what a lot of my activist friends will talk about, you know, they can easily burn out if you're only focusing on these are the problems and we have to tackle these problems. You have to step away and find, where's the joy in my life, you know, and how can I spread that joy to others as well. And that was also part of this book. I was hoping that people were going to find that it really is informed with joy, you know,
Yes.
Even though we talk on some heavy subjects. I talk about the Rainbow Dead, and I talk about very specific figures in queer history and how history did them wrong, you know, and that's been a constant struggle, you know, for our queer communities, is that we're often oppressed and killed, and there's violence, and all those things are true. And we have to remember those things. We have to remember the Pulse nightclub tragedy. We have to remember Alan Turing and how he was arrested for being queer and was chemically castrated. That's part of our history, but we don't get stuck there. We remember those roots. Those are the roots of the tree that's growing now. And hopefully that tree, we will tend it, it will grow and blossom, and fruit, and we will get something good and beautiful out of it, because we're trying to build a better tomorrow. And we can only do that if we bring joy into the mix.
And also, as you mentioned, Pulse, you know, how a lot of people, let me choose my words wisely. A lot of people are not very interested on talking about Pulse because the majority of our queers that we lost there were people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's why I think it's extra important. We have to remember that the queer community is not just the white queer community.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with like feminism. It's like, hello, there are women of color. They are women, you know, so an issue that affects Black women should be tackled by all women, you know,
and
that's
it's
real
all,
feminism.
Again, all these intersectionalities, because the most precious lives, and I'm saying, please understand what I'm saying, they're all precious, but the most precious at this moment, the most vulnerable are our Black women and our Black transgender women.
Right.
And
they're the ones who are being targeted the most.
Yeah. Yes.
Like everybody's getting targeted, you know, in the minorities. However, we can easily see some are more vulnerable than others. So we need to put extra care and energy on those segments of society that are the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
To me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You know, but I think you're absolutely right. I think that it becomes this racial divide, which to me, maybe I'm wading into weird territory here, but that always has rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, aren't we the human race? You know, shouldn't we be able to not? I'm not saying be colorblind. That's absurd. You know, but I don't understand why we can't just celebrate differences. And yet it's always about fear. It's always about hatred. Oh, you're different, and therefore I'm not even going to try to understand you, or I'm going to think that you're inferior or whatever. And the whole white supremacy thing, I'm like, have you seen these white supremacists? I can't even believe that they think that they're a superior race. I'm like, come on, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
But
the superior race that tells us immigrants to speak correctly but cannot even write a protest sign. I mean,
oh my gosh,
we can Storm, we can continue talking about the intersectionalities of our very many communities for days, my dear friend. Alas, our time has just continued going. Before we go, I want to mention thank you. And it's a good thing that you're coming back, because we can continue talking back about other things. I also want to mention thank you for making this very specific mention of magic does not equal therapy. Therapy is therapy. Tap into that, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, mostly I have experience with this because, you know, running a shop for as long as I did, and people would come in with their magical problems. And often I would feel, oh, this is not necessarily a magical or a spiritual issue. This seems like it's a psychological or, you know, issue. Maybe you need a psychiatrist, you know. And I've had to refer people before, you know, to counselors. And I lost customers, I lost clients because people would get really offended, even though I was trying so hard not to be judgy and to try to, you know, destigmatize, you know, mental, you know, illness. But just because you are a witch or you know, a sorcerer or whatever, does not mean that you are a psychologist, you know. And so I recognize I have limitations. You know, I've had students before that I've had to say, oh, we can't go any further because I'm not qualified to take you further. In fact, that would be irresponsible of me, because it could cause some real psychological damage. You know, magic and the occult, it does delve into psychology. It absolutely does. And to a degree, that's fine. You know, for I don't know, the average person on the street is probably fine. But if you are dealing with some deep-seated issues, you don't need a shaman. You know, you need a therapist, right? Exactly. Or maybe both. You know, maybe you need both. But you know, if you're going through shadow work and it gets a little hairy, you know, maybe you don't want to just rely on your high priest, you know, and your shaman. Maybe you need to go and seek some actual therapy and then kind of join those things together. And that to me is the best. If you can have a therapist and a high priest, you know, then you're probably golden. But don't expect your high priest to be a therapist unless your high priest is actually a therapist.
Exactly.
You know, you know, and even that's a little tricky, you know, because then it's like, oh, who's power dynamics again, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But
and I think that what you don't know about me is that my biggest pet peeve is these people who utilize psychological terms to sell their products, and that they will sell this workshop on take our 3-hour workshop, and for $1,500 you can heal your inner child. To which I say, in 3 hours you can probably understand the concept of the inner child. You know,
right.
You're not gonna heal it, and so folks run.
That's a lifetime of work, by the way. Run.
Yes,
exactly. You should run.
Should run.
That's late stage capitalism. You know, come on. God, yes. You know, it's just making a buck. And I have no qualms against people making an honest buck. You know, making an honest living, but that's not honest.
No.
You know, that if you believe that that's true, you've been misled.
Yeah.
You know,
I, as a witch for hire, self-defined witch for hire, I facilitate for people, and I'll be like, my strength, me, Laura Gonzalez, my strength is when I recognize that I cannot help you anymore.
Yep.
And I can send you to the therapist.
Yep, exactly. And that's what you want. You want somebody who's going to be authentic, because you're coming to us for help. I'm a warlock for hire, right? So I get it, you know, and my job is to meet the client where they are spiritually. I'm not here to like push my spirituality off onto other people. You know, that wouldn't even work. It wouldn't even make sense, you know? So, but part of that is recognizing that I can only go so far. I have limitations, and I'm not even necessarily talking about the legal limitations, although that's a big thing too. You know, you can't call yourself a therapist if you're not a freaking therapist. You know, even when I do Reiki, I don't call myself a Reiki therapist. I call myself a Reiki practitioner.
Exactly.
You know, technically, I guess Reiki master, whatever, but it all sounds weird.
Yeah, it's also weird.
It all sounds weird. Even the black wand is a fairy master. Sometimes like, oh God, it just sounds weird. But
you know what? At the same time,
whatever.
as a person that also feels weird saying all the titles, and I'm Laura the Blue Witch, that's it. But it also comes with a recognition of what's behind the title, which we're going to talk about when you come back, talking about the witch's name.
Yeah.
So I love that the time it just keeps flying on us. The Satyr Kiss. Where can people find your book?
Well, you can go to my website, faerywolf.com. That's FAERYWOLF.com. And just click on books, and then you can see all of my books, and that will have links to get them. You can get signed copies from my shop. There's a link there. My shop is daturatrading.com. But you can also get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, really anywhere that books are sold. Thank you very much, Llewellyn. They have really good distributorship. I'm having a great time working with them. But yeah, and then for classes, you can check us out at modernwitchuniversity.com. And that is the home of our very successful Black Rose Witchcraft course. It's a 1-year course in modern folkloric witchcraft. So you can check that out. But yeah, just find me on faerywolf.com. Find me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, but I do hate them. You know, so Twitter is my thing. I do have a TikTok account. I've not posted a single thing. I don't think I ever will. So find me on Twitter is the moral of the story.
Yeah, find you on Twitter, and find you on the website where you can find the books and signed copies. And we shall meet in person at one point in time, so I can get a signature.
Will. Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
And I know I said it already like a million times. Storm is coming back later in the year. We're going to talk about the witch's name, because that is also a wonderful book. And my only thing that I have left is to say thank you very much for coming to the show. Thank you very much for writing this very important book. lifting all those voices and doing a job that I know is not easy to do, which is uplifting all the voices, but that's kind of goes with the
Wow. Well,
privileges. But
thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for inviting me back on. It's always a pleasure. You always make me feel so welcomed, and I have a great time, as evidenced by the fact that time has literally slipped through our fingers. I feel like I've only been here a few minutes. So thank you again. And I'm looking forward to coming back.
And thank you so much to all our audience. Please, would you like to say something for your audience?
Well, I just want to say thank you for all of your support. It's been amazing. Thank you for all of the good reviews and ratings. And I will say, if you have read my books and you haven't reviewed and or rated them yet, please consider doing so, especially over at Goodreads, because that's a really tough audience. And some people, you know, I do have a few haters, and they will show up and kind of give me those 1 stars and whatever. So hopefully I'll get some people that are, you know, more on my side, going to Goodreads especially. But I just want to say thank you so much for all the years of support. I couldn't do this without you. I'm making my living 100% from being a writer and a teacher and a warlock for hire. And I couldn't do that without really wonderful people helping to support me. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Storm, for being here. Thank you for coming back. You're going to come back. And I know, have I told you he's coming back later? I'm just excited because we just booked it. So please forgive me. Anyway, what I have left to say is please listen to every single one of the shows on CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Naval podcast. We have, of course, Selena Fox, with Nature Mystic and Nature Spirituality on Wednesdays and Sundays. We have Circle Talk 2 Tuesdays a month. We have Moon Magic 2 Thursdays a month with David and Janet Ewan, and then Circle Talk with Deborah Rose. We have Blue Marble with Charlotte Bear, and we have Paganos del Mundo, Pagaos del Mundo, our show in Spanish and Portuguese on Saturdays with Cristina Ortiz, Carolina Moore, Monica Gobin, Harwood Tuleva, and Laura Gonzalez. And of course, we have Lunes Lunáticos, Lunatic Mondays, every Monday with yours truly. And until we meet again, never forget that you are loved. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Circle Sanctuary Network podcasts, presented by Circle Sanctuary and produced for all who follow the Nature Center paths. Join us here throughout the week for various programming connecting the community around the world. And please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. And follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CSN podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and others. And until next time, many blessings.